So I will just talk about mainly about reproducibility of the data and how to store the data, like what type of platforms we can use in Aalto to store our data, and also like a hands-on experience in depositing data in repositories such as like Zenodo. So that is the main part of my presentation. So when we talk about research reproducibility, like two things that focus, mainly the two things, two different aspects. One is like there is we should not lose any data, like for the next researchers or for ourselves. This is why we talk about we should not lose any data, because there are instances like when there is a new researcher who is going to continue the research of a previous researcher, and then there is no previous data. So this newly coming researcher has to start from the scratch. So in order to avoid that type of situation, it is always better to store our data in a very organized way. And the other aspect of reproducibility, so this is one side of one way when we talk about reproducibility. The other meaning of reproducibility is like that everyone knows, like we have reported some results, and if other researchers cannot repeat the same results by using your experimental data, then there is no point in your results, like your result is completely invalid. So that is why we have to be very careful about our results, like our reported results. So it should be reproducible. So why it is very important when we talk about reproducibility? The first point is like it is your results are very credible, like it is a proof of your results. And if you are storing your data in a very organized way, then other researchers doesn't have to spend their time to repeat the same experiments. So it will speed up the research. So thirdly, it is the promotion of a transparent science. So in several instances, it is very difficult to reproduce the results. Sometimes the methods are not described very well, like there is no, all the data, all the things related to your experiment is not recorded. So for example, when we say like, I did this experiment using like concentrated hydrochloric acid, but if you are not mentioning what is the concentration you have used, so it will be difficult for just for an example I'm talking, it will be difficult for the next researcher when they try to repeat the same experiment. It will be difficult for them. They have to also spend much time to try the conditions. And in some other cases, we have the data, but the data is not, it cannot be opened by any system readable format. If it is not in a system readable format, then it is difficult for the next researcher to open this data. And sometimes there is no data at all. So in order to what is the solution for this? Either we have to provide the supporting information in data repositories. For example, we can use a Zenodo. And also in another way, like for our own, for your departmental use, even for the next researcher you are called, that those who are coming into your group, if you store your data in a shared network drives, then it is easy for the next researcher to find the data. So for a researcher, the data is the most valuable thing. And in Aalto, we have two different place where we can store our data. One is basically the Aalto network drive, and the second one is the cloud service. So the important thing is like in Aalto, we should not use like our personal computer or any other external hard disk to store the data that related to the Aalto. So we should always try to use the network drives or the Aalto cloud service to store the data. Again, when we use the network drive, we cannot store all the data. Like we have to also quite wise when we store the data. What type of data that we can store into the Aalto network drive? For example, if we have some sensitive data, but as a chemist, I don't know, like do we have any sensitive data? For example, the patient's information or something related to that type of sensitive personal sensitive data. If we are going to store that type of data in the Aalto network drive, then always we have to use the data should be encrypted, and also it will be like access restricted. So that means like not everyone can access this data. Only the people who are assigned, they can only access this data. And the same that goes to the confidential data. So when we talk about the confidential data, it can be also secret informations like sensitive data and also the trade secrets. So when you store those type of data, it will be like it should be access restricted. In Aalto, basically we have three different types of network options. One is like the personal one. So everyone in Aalto have that personal storage place. So here, when you use the personal storage space, it is for your personal use. So you cannot share using your personal drive. And again, it has a space of only 100 GB. And the second one is like a departmental data storage space. It is quite big, like around 2 TB the space. And the best thing is like here you can share the data within the department. So like I always recommend when people store their data, it will be always good if you store your data in the departmental storage space. So it will be like it can be easily accessible to other researchers. Of course, if you have some if you don't want to open your research to others, like you think like there will be like some robbery can happen. So then you have to, you can also put like access restricted with the help of the IT persons. And the third one, so here it is like only you can share the data within the department. So if you have a collaboration within outside the department, so then it is better to use the research group storage space. So then you can share the data within the Aalto, different schools in Aalto. And the next option is the Aalto cloud service. And there are different platforms when we talk about cloud services, and you all know about these different cloud services. And we should be also like when we put the data there in the cloud service, we have to be also wise, like what type of data and which cloud services we can put this data. As you can see from the table, if the public data, then you can use any of these cloud services. There is no restrictions from the Aalto side. But if you have the sensitive data, like Aalto recommends, like you should not use Google or Dropbox, but you can use Teams, OneDrive, eDuni. But again, there is conditions are there, and there is no link sharing. So you cannot put a link for the data if it is a sensitive data, and if you have shared them in these types of cloud services, then you cannot. It should be like access restricted. So you cannot have a link for the same. Then when we talk about the confidential data, you can use all these cloud services, but there is some restrictions. So sometimes it should be, you can put, if it is encrypted data, and then if there is like, for example, if you are going to do the upload the confidential data in Dropbox, then you have to consult with the IT people. So because it is like a case dependent. And thirdly, like you can use the Teams, OneDrive, Udemy. If there is if it is if it is available to only to some authorized people, only few authorized people, and then if there is no link sharing. And when we share the data, when we use the cloud services for the research collaboration, the two important points that we have to think about is like take care of the data confidentiality and like how the long-term usage of this data. So these are the two important things that we are going to see in the next slides. So about the data confidentiality, this is important aspect when we do the research collaboration over the cloud. So the main point is that there should not be any link, like no, like you cannot access this data with a link. So it should be like the in the beginning itself, everyone should be like those contributors in this group. Everyone should be aware about the rules and regulations, and the contributors can log in to this group only using the email ID. That means there should not be any open link. So these are the two important points when we share the confidential data over the cloud storage. And like when we have the confidential data, as we already I already explained about that. So like secrets data for the trade secrets, you have to take extra security measures. And the next point is long-term availability. So here, when we talk about the from the data, so you think about a stage like everyone, like many of the researchers, especially those who are doctoral students or postdocs, most of them will leave after some times from the Aalto. So after you leave, who can access your data? If you stored your data in a personal folder, and if you haven't shared your data in the departmental storage space, so then there is like, and if you have not published those data, then all your research work has gone into vain. So in order to avoid that, the best recommendation is try to practice store your data in the departmental storage space, and also keep more than not to keep some others as also owner of your shared folder. For example, your supervisor can be the best person for to ask the second owner. So the supervisor can take care of the data after you leave the university. And the next option is you can. So this is very important because as I said in the beginning of this presentation, so in my own group, we came across these issues when there is a new researcher who wants to who just hard to continue research from the previous researcher, but there was no data. We couldn't find it. We couldn't get any access to those data. So then this newly came researcher has to repeat everything from the scratch. So that is why we say it is easier for the research, or also for speeding up the research it is easier to share your data in like these types of shared folders. And the second option is like not only even you can use some repositories. So you can even there are different types. You can put open access or closed access or restricted access. So, but if you put your data sets in some repositories, and then if you give the open access, so anyone can access your data, and so that will also speed up the research. And also even though the cloud is a reliable storage technology, but there are some issues because we don't know what will happen with the license and agreement in the after some years. So then if there is a break, if the agreement is getting broken, then there is like so in order to avoid losing your data, so it is also a good plan to back up your data in some other way also, like maybe in that case you can put it in the personal storage space also. So only like just for the backup. And so the documentation is very important, why it is because maybe you can understand your data today if you haven't documented your data very properly, but after some years what will happen, like if you didn't document your data very carefully, and then like you were in one project, or you are in one project today and you are working for that project, and after sometimes you get some other projects, so you leave all this data aside, and after some years again you wanted to use this data, but if you haven't documented it properly, then you may not be able to understand your data. And the second thing is like if your supervisor look into your data, the supervisor should understand what it is all about. So that is why it is very important. When you document your data, you should not think about yourself, but you think about others who want to use this data. So it is not only for you, but it is also for others to locate your data so that it can be reused in the future. So when we document our data, there are some points that we have to keep in mind. So the first one is like there should be like a structured folders, and this from the name of the folder you can understand what this folder belongs. So you should not accumulate all the data. Like for example, you may have data belongs to some experiments, and then you have data from your analytical studies, and different types of analysis you have used. If you put all this data in one space, then it will be very difficult for others to understand. Not only for others, but also for you. So that is why we say like you have different directories in your folder, and then every data should have an understandable headers, and it is better to store the data in a system readable format. So that will be easy for others and also for you. And most importantly, if you can keep a README file in your folder, then it will be easy like to people to understand what this folder all about. So we will see more about README file in the next slides. So I'm just showing some way the researchers store their data, like how so you can see like there is no name of the project, so maybe like a project 2, but from this I don't think like this is a good practice to store the data. So even the researcher who put this data cannot able to, of course they cannot understand after some years or some months. So there is another way, like you put the different folders. You say like, okay, you did one set of experiments and you put it in batch A, and batch B, batch C. But if your supervisor look into this, the supervisor may not able to understand what this all batch A, batch B, batch C. So that is why we say like we have to put, there should be your folder heading should be descriptive. So the people should be able to understand what this folder all about. And also when you put some data, for example, FTIR manuscript, what FTIR, for which material, what this FTIR belongs to. So you have to always name your data. Some way this is for example, one way here the project is you have given the project name and you are dividing your data into based on material fabrication, and the other way, the other folder is all about the studies like the magnetic and the mechanical studies. So where we keep up, when we talk about the material fabrication, there you have another subfolders where you can find all the X-ray data or UV-Vis data. And then when you go into the mechanical, like this magnetic or flexibility study, there you will get data related to your magnetic studies or the mechanical studies. There again, you give different, you subdivide the folders and name it. So it is easy for the people to track your research. So when we say about the file naming, there are few points that we have to consider when we do the file naming. As I said previously, we have to be very descriptive. Like we should be from the file name, people should be able to understand what it is, what this file all about. It is always good to give the project name. If you don't have a project name, then you can put an experimental number that can be tracked from your batch records or the lab notebooks. So you can sometimes for example, I work with ALD. So in our case, when we do every deposition, so it will generate one specific number. So that is why like here, this is my experimental number. So instead of the project number. Then it is better to give your the researcher name initials, so it will be easy for the someone else to understand who did this experiment. And it is also good to give the date when you performed this experiment, and what type of data it is, and what type of conditions you have used. And also, like if you have a different version of the same file, then you can also give version numbers. So here it likes my initials and my experiment number, and what this material and what was like in our case, like what is the deposition temperature. So the researcher who is from the ALD department or ALD group, like those who know the ALD, they will understand easily what it is all about and what was the deposition temperature I have used, what type of analytical data it is. So everything. So that is what I say, like your file name should be very descriptive. And then in order to support your documentation, you can use the README files. So again, the README files, the basic, like the title, what it is, what this file all about, what this experiment all about, and who are the authors and the date. So, and if you are using some abbreviations in your data file, try to explain this abbreviation also. So you can use the README files or lab notebooks, data dictionaries. Data dictionary is very important when you have like a spreadsheet with a large number of variables. So it is always better. It is always good to use the data dictionary in such cases. So here one example of a file. So here so here you can see, like I told you, a README file is very important. So I have given a README file. What is the project name? and when this project has started. So as you can see, like I have used some abbreviations here when like it is talking about what type of precursor I have used for this particular deposition. So it is easy for the next researcher, not only for the next researcher, for myself, it is easy to understand what was these abbreviations here. So it is always better to keep these types of README files where you can get all the information regarding your file. So okay, you already you saw something about documenting your data. Now about publishing. So as all of us know, like publishing is very important because it will give you citations. So that is so it is very important for us to publish our results. And in some cases, we may not have a complete results or complete, like you are not satisfied with all your data to publish it into some scientific journals. So you can also do one thing, like if you don't think like it is impossible for you to publish in a scientific journals, you can use some data repositories for example, Zenodo, EUDAT, or FAIRDAT services. Like you can choose any of these repositories, and you can publish your data sets, or even you can publish your if you have a poster that is not going to be in any publications, but even you can put that poster or your presentation slides, anything that you feel like it will be good for other researchers. So you can put them into these types of repositories. So that even like all these repositories will give you DOI that can be used for citations. So it is very good. So it is also promote open science. So there are general repositories. I was talking about the Zenodo, that is general repositories. Any type of material can be deposited there. But as for chemistry persons, you may already know about CCDC, this Cambridge repository for the crystallographic data. So these are like a very specific repositories. So like my colleague Lucy will give a little more idea about, or basically, sorry, what type of data repositories are mainly used by the chemistry department. So I will just discuss something about Zenodo, Zenodo repository. As I said in the beginning, it is a general, it is a general purpose open access repository. And so here it is not only for the data sets, but you can also publish, you can also deposit research papers if it is an open access, so that even you can put it into a Zenodo, and like softwares or any other research related materials, anything that you can publish in Zenodo. So here it is better, it is always good practice when you deposit some data in a Zenodo. You can have a README file. I'm just giving one example from our own group. My colleague, he has deposited these data sets. So this is they have already published this paper, this research paper, and then they have published the data sets in Zenodo. And why it is very important these days to know about these types of open repositories, because many of the funding agencies, for example, our Academy of Finland, it is very necessary that you have to always you have to give a data management plan, as you know. Then there you have to say always like we will open our data sets. So that is why it is very important for it is very important these days to know about how we can use these types of open repositories. So we will see about, we will go to these data sets. So here we can see like, so this is already published, and then they are giving this different data sets. So as you have seen in the README file, you have already seen the what it is. This README, what are the files that are inside of these data sets. So there's data structure, data spectra, and data non-interacting spectra. So you can just give a README file to describe the data sets inside your file. So now we will try to deposit one something for the like to know to see how we can deposit the data sets. So it, as I said, like it is not only the data sets, anything that related to your research can be deposited. So you can use. So I don't know how many of you have used. If you are a new user, then like you can access the you can log into Zenodo with your RCID. So now, like I can reach into my page. So here, the first thing is like you can see this upload button. You just click on that. So here, if you have already published some data in Zenodo, then you can see it will show first that. But if you want to deposit a new material, then you just go to this new upload. So here there are two options. One, you can drag and drop files, or you can take the file from your folders. So I am just going to upload one presentation slide for demonstration purpose. So then, so once you chose your file, then you have to upload it. So just click Start Upload. Now there is a next option, like you can deposit your data sets or whatever it is in a specific community. Like for example, if I just look for, because this is ALD related. So if I look for ALD, no, there is nothing is coming. So there is no community-based community for the ALD. So I cannot put this data in any specific community. In this case, I have another option, like I can create my own. I can create a community for the ALD related material. Or, for example, if you want your own community, and you can create one by yourself. So I'm not going to do that at this moment. Then it is important you have to specify what it is, what type of file you are uploading here. So in my case, as you can see from here, you can put publications of poster, presentation, and software, etc., etc. So here it is a presentation. So I am just going to give it as a presentation. But if it was a publication, then it will ask about if it is already published in some article, some journals. Then you have to specify that. Or like if it is a conference paper, whatever it is, you can specify about what type of publication it is. So since it is a presentation, I will just opt presentation. And then about the DOI. So here, it is an optional one. Like if you already have a DOI for this, you can give that DOI, and then you can reserve that DOI. But if you don't have a DOI, but the system will automatically generate a DOI for your data sets. Then you can give the title. So you give the title here. So then the authors and their affiliation, and like for example, now I just give So you can also you have to add all names of all the authors here. So, and if you give the RCID, like for everyone, then it will be directly related to their research outputs. And then in the description, it is mainly, the description is like what type of file it is and what it is all about. So here in the description, because this is a conference presentation, so I just put that in the description. So this presentation has been used in ABS conference 2021. And then if it is like you wanted to give like, if you think like at some point, if you notice that there are some mistakes, you can just, you can rewrite, and then it will be counted as version 2. So then it will go like V1 or V2 like that. Then if you want to put some keywords, since it is basically it is a ALD, MLD, I will put some keywords like thin films and magnetic materials. So, etc. And if you want to give some additional notes, you can put the additional notes here. And here you can make it whether your data sets or your publication is like an open access, or if you want to put it as an embargoed access or restricted, closed, it is up to you. You can select one of these. And as you have noticed, it is a license is open access. And here you have to give about your whatever the grants you have used. So for example, in my case, Academy of Finland, you give the, if you know the project or the grant number, just give the number there, then it automatically. So it has already selected what was this funding, what grant it was, what project. So it will automatically select that. Then basically you can save your data. So once you saved, you can, it is not necessary that you need to publish now. You just save your data. Then you can publish it if you're confident on your data sets, whatever you have uploaded here. So at this point, I'm not going to publish it. I have just shown it as like as an example. I will think about publishing it later. So now we have to I hope you understood something about how to upload your data sets in Zenodo. And if you have any questions, please you can ask in the chats or after this presentation. So in conclusions, it is a good practice to store or document, publish your data because as I told throughout the presentation, you will forget about your experimental conditions or whatever the protocol you have used in your experiments or in your research. So that is why it is always good to store or document your data for yourself and for other researchers. And so once you leave the university, Aalto, then your colleagues or your supervisor can use this data. And about documenting, good data document procedure is like folder structure, file naming, and also as I said, it is always better to keep the README file as we have seen when we put the Zenodo, when we show in the Zenodo, and also to give the information in your lab notebooks. And now finally, some few words about our RDM in the Aalto University. There are different types of services we do in RDM, like data agents. So data agents are like just a linking person between the research data management and the department. So you can contact the data agents if you have some questions related to your DMB or anything related to research data management. So the data agent, if the data agent cannot answer you properly or help you properly, then the data agent always take the help from the other people from the RDM and try to solve out your issues. And there are other IT experts and legal counsel. And then there is recently we have this research software engineers. So their main role is like if you have any questions related to software, computing, and data, they are ready to help you. And this is a very good opportunity that is available these days in the RDM. So if you have any questions, then please contact the following email ID, researchdata@aalto.fi.
Right, so in my part of the webinar, we will take a closer look at research data publishing, and we will also have a look at what ACRIS can do for you. So I will briefly introduce ACRIS, what it is and how it's different from a data repository. And we will look at the data from ACRIS telling us where researchers from the School of Chemical Engineering have published their data. And I hope that there will be enough time left for your questions, and I will also answer if you have any questions about ACRIS in general, not just about research data in ACRIS. There will be a specific event for ACRIS later in November, so you can save your more specific questions for then. We will market the event soon enough. And so what is ACRIS? The acronym stands for Aalto Current Research Information System. And this is a information system that gathers information on all aspects of research at Aalto into one place. This means publications and datasets, projects, infrastructures, information about conference participation and other academic and professional activities. And we use all this information to report it to the Ministry of Education and Culture, which affects the basic funding of universities. We also use ACRIS for the so-called green open access, which is a term you might have heard if you work in any projects that have been publicly funded, like EU projects or Academy of Finland projects. This means that if an article hasn't been published with an open access license in a journal, you can make it open access by self-archiving the final accepted manuscript in Aalto. And if you're interested in this process, you can click the link here if you're at Aalto University. Basically, you just send your manuscript to us at Open Science and ACRIS team, and we upload it for you. Here are some links. If you're at Aalto University, you can access the internal, the backend of ACRIS when you log in with your Aalto username and password, and the public portal is open to everyone. So can you publish your research data in ACRIS? Actually, no, it's not built. It's a research information system which is built to collect the metadata about research outputs. Data repository is where the actual dataset is stored and published. Anish already gave you some examples like Zenodo. And there's a difference between storing the live research data during your project. Anish was talking about that, and then storing the data after the project, the underlying data behind your results in a reusable form that you might need to share with the peer reviewers or your colleagues, other researchers who might either want to reuse your data or they read your article, they want to see the data and they see something interesting and they might think, oh, this person or this team, this department has this expertise and I want to collaborate with them. So that's another useful aspect of sharing your data in a repository. But in ACRIS, when you upload the metadata or descriptive metadata of your datasets, these can be linked here to your profile, to the research group, to your publications or the projects. They have the projects that the data was created within. And we only upload metadata of published datasets with a persistent identifier like DOI. So if there's like a PDF file of supplementary information linked to an article, this is not eligible. So how do you add dataset information to ACRIS? The good news is that if you're at Aalto University, the Open Science and ACRIS team does a lot for you as a service. We have a data monitor tool in ACRIS, which collects the metadata from a number of repositories. But note that this is dependent on recognizing your affiliation with Aalto University. So the data monitor tool looks for datasets published with Aalto University affiliation. So as Anish showed you, you can fill in your affiliation, for example, in Zenodo. So please remember to do that, because this is how it's recognized as something that we should upload to ACRIS. Another thing we do is we go through data accessibility statements in research publications. And if there is a link or DOI, we can add this for you to ACRIS. And once again, it's better to upload to a repository that gives you this persistent identifier than to use just a PDF or Word file as supplementary information, because with the DOI, the dataset is citable and you can collect more citations. People will usually not cite only your article, but they will also cite the data if they looked at it and used it in some way. So what you can do is, if you notice that something is missing, that we haven't found some of your data sets and you want them linked to your profile in ACRIS, you can add the dataset information manually, and we will validate it for you. We will check the information if it's correct, maybe to complete something, and then we will validate it for you. Here is a link to instructions how to do this, and we can have a look at it later in the demo. Here are a couple of examples how you can cite how you can link your own data in your article in a way that's citable and findable. So here are two publications with the data availability statement, and you can see that there is a DOI. There is also some supplementary material for the article specifically, but there is DOI for the actual data. And there is also a note about how you can access the code that has been used to process this data. And yeah, in this other example, you can also see that there are links to repository entries. So it's if you have uploaded your data to a repository, this is a good way to make it actually visible. If the link to the DOI is just somewhere in the text, it's a bit harder to find for us and also for the researchers who want to cite your data. I will show you now. I'll stop sharing the presentation, and I hope you can see the browser now with the public portal.
Yes, we can see.
Good. I will show you an example of how datasets can be showcased in ACRIS in the public portal. And I asked Professor Riikka Puuronen for permission to use her profile, because her group has a very nice dataset in Zenodo that is very well documented. So this is her profile. And here, if you click on datasets, you can find, it might be a bit slow now. Oh no, it's working fine. So here you can see the dataset I was talking about. So you can see here that the dataset is stored in Zenodo. This is just the descriptive metadata of the dataset with authors and their affiliations and the description, which is collected from Zenodo and dataset license. And here, it's actually linked to the article that is using this data, and it's also linked to the projects that have funded this research. And there is a citation example if someone wants to cite this dataset. And if we click on the article, this is a very comprehensive entry where you can see a lot more information than just somewhere on, I don't know, ResearchGate. Because here it gives you all the citations and how many times the article has been downloaded. And there's a link to the preprint that would have been available even before the article was published. And there are some keywords, and the data set is showcased here. So this is what I meant when I said that ACRIS brings all the various types of information about your research into one place. And here, this also links to the equipment that has been used in this research or infrastructures. And yeah, this is the actual dataset in Zenodo. And there actually is, what Anish gave his example, he was looking for an LAD community. There actually is one, but this is a curated community that is curated by Professor Purunen's group. So you can't just add something there if you're not a member of the community. But there will be, if they produce any more datasets in the course of these projects, they can link them here in Zenodo in the ALD community. About adding datasets in ACRIS, and this is pretty simple. This is ACRIS, the backend, the internal side of ACRIS, and your view is a bit different from mine because I don't have any publications. I'm not an active researcher. I'm just administrative stuff. So yours will look a bit different, but there will be this add content button, which is usually green, but I've already clicked this before, so it turned orange. So if you click this, there will be an option. Usually it goes straight here to research output, which there are articles and book chapters and stuff like that. But if you go here to dataset, you can select either import from online source. This is the data monitor tool that I talked about before. And here, if your dataset, which is not in ACRIS yet, does have a DOI, you can enter the DOI here and search, and it should pre-fill a lot of information for you. But if it doesn't work, if the data monitor doesn't find your dataset because it only is connected to a limited amount of repositories, you can create your entry from a blank template. So dataset, and there you can see here with the red star, the compulsory information that you really have to fill in. And remember, please, to always give us the DOI or other persistent identifier if your dataset has like a URN or handle or some different type of persistent identifier. This is really important for us to be able to validate the dataset. Right. I will go back to the presentation now. Right, so we just did this short demo, and now I will show you where your colleagues or people from the School of Chemical Engineering have published datasets before. So I ran a search in ACRIS at the end of October and found 198 datasets with the School of Chemical Engineering departments as a managing organization. And almost all of these are published with open access. I found only 2 with restricted access, which is something you can do as well. You don't have to publish if there are some reasons why your dataset cannot be published with open access immediately. You can use in a lot of repositories, you can set this embargo period, which enables you to publish first based on your data before you open it to the whole world. And another case that I found in ACRIS was a database which required login, which makes sure that the people who are using the data are actually researchers. But as I said, almost all of these are published with open access. And this sample of 198 datasets is obviously limited because it's only what we actually have in ACRIS. which means what the data monitor tool found, or what we in the Open Science and ACRIS team imported manually from data availability statements, or what researchers have uploaded themselves. So there might be many more data sets published with some of the authors having Aalto affiliation, but we don't have them in ACRIS. So this is a limited sample. But here you can see the repositories that have been used by researchers in the School of Chemical Engineering. And you can see that the majority, a really big amount, has been published in CCDC. And there are multiple reasons why we have so many CCDC datasets in ACRIS. One of which is that these have been imported for us by the service provider as a service. And another reason being that a lot of the journals of the Royal Society of Chemistry actually recommend depositing your data to CCDC. And another reason being that, as Anis showed you, for example, in Zenodo, you can upload multiple files into a dataset, while in CCDC, each structure gets a DOI. So each structure is cataloged here as a single entry. So that's why it makes so many entries in ACRIS. But other popular repositories are, for example, Zenodo and Nomad or Figshare. I will go through these in more detail in a while, but some of these I haven't included in the lists that follow because these are institutional data repositories provided by a collaborator in these projects. For example, ILL, this is not accessible for deposition to just anyone, or the University of Cambridge repository. So here I have selected the repositories that you can actually use for your research. First, here are some general purpose repositories. This means that these repositories accept depositions from various disciplines, various types of data types, of files. And there might be a downside to this because sometimes you need a discipline-specific repository that can cater to your field of science and the type of metadata that you need to add to your dataset to make it understandable. But for many purposes, these are excellent options. And I included some examples from Aalto University here, and we don't have to go through these here because it would take a lot of time, but you will get these materials after the event. So if you, for example, are interested what it looks like if you publish research data in the Finnish National Affair Data Services, you can have a look at the link or any other of these repositories. And perhaps more interesting for you are these discipline-specific repositories that have been used in the School of Chemical Engineering. And this is CCDC that I already mentioned. CCDC includes the Cambridge Structural Database, which accepts organic and organometallic structures. And it also includes the Inorganic Crystal Structure Database. And here is an example for you, or I can show you actually this example search. So you can see how data is cataloged in CCDC. So this search found all the data that is cited in a certain publication. I searched with the DOI of the journal article. This here is the journal article. And it gives you a collection of all the entries that are associated with this article, all the structures. And you can see that each of these structures has its own DOI, its own landing page. And it's a bit slow, but here you can see the kind of metadata that can be added in CCDC. This is not something that Zenodo can do for you, for example. Back to the presentation. Nomad is stands for Novel Materials Discovery. And this is a repository for computational materials science data. So this is Nomad can be relevant for you if you're in material science. And Protein Data Bank is another discipline-specific repository that has been used multiple times at the School of Chemical Engineering. So if you have any data that could go there, you can check this example, how it actually is displayed. And it also allows a lot of discipline-specific metadata that in Zenodo, for example, you would have to put in the README file, while here it's displayed in a machine-readable way. Yes, so this was all from me.